We're live. Okay, good. It's really slow. Yeah, computers really are acting up. Maybe it's the wind. So, I'm going to look on my phone on the YouTube and just look and make sure it's broadcasting. Because it's really choppy and I've got that little circle that keeps coming back. So I'm going to do this. Go to my channel. I'm not going to manage my channel. There I am! Okay. Wow, that's so exciting. The creative process. Okay, so I did assign Federalist number 10, which is on that second to last page of that Revolutionary War packet, Revolutionary War era. It's, even though it starts in 1676, maybe the founding of the country. Well, Bacon's Rebellion, you could argue. But this is a key piece of, it's more propaganda, but it's really telling you why Madison wanted this Constitution to be ratified. So please read those and answer those questions. That was due, we do at the end of the day today. And then, did you catch what I said about extra credit? Yeah, the map. Has to be in today. If you have the map, I'll take it. If not, take a picture of it, get it in today on Teams. Anybody have it? Okay, that's extra credit, but only today. Well, through today. You have it? Great. And pretty basic. And don't forget the short IDs. Today's the last day to ask for that.
I will say I
And
get the majority of the class, but there's some stuff on here.
what couldn't you find?
I have, for some reason I can find like Valley Forge and recipes.
Valley Forge is just north of Philadelphia.
Oh, well, okay. I can turn it in later.
Turn it in later.
Stuff.
Yeah, just north of Philadelphia. If you get a chance, go there. It's really cool.
Isn't Ticonderoga just north of Philadelphia?
What's that?
Is Ticonderoga just north of Philadelphia?
No, did you say Valley Forge or Ticonderoga?
Valley Forge.
Yeah, Valley Forge is, so here's, with Philadelphia, Valley Forge is right about there, just northwest. Ticonderoga is just south of Lake Champlain.
Oh, wow. This
A
is...
little off on that one? Okay. And there was that little reading quiz. Most of you have taken the quiz, haven't you? The quiz that should be on Teams. Did we do well? Everyone do well? I hope so. So that's on Teams. There are 6 questions. And then I did assign, I put up there 264 to 299. I'm going to do another one of those little quizzes on that too, little 6-question thing. That worked out pretty well, didn't it? I was looking at how long people did it. It took you about a minute, most of you, to do that. Please get that done. That's to be done basically by today. And, okay, so, who elects the president, by the way? The people do not elect the president. Who elects the president? What's the name of that body? Better remember? Because it's electing right now, yeah. Say it again. No, that's what Madison really wanted, but the same people elect the president today. That'll the Electoral College, yeah. Madison originally wanted the House to do it. He thought that it would go back to the House, but it's the Electoral College. The Electoral College elects the president, and what is the only branch of government, the only part of government that's elected by the people, at least in the original Constitution? It's part of the legislative body? Yeah, the House. The House of Representatives. Heard a couple little answers around there. The Senate would pick by state assemblies. In 1913 would go to the people, and that's why there are now direct elections for the Senate. In fact, there's a Senate election in the state of Montana right now. And in fact, the last poll I saw, it is basically tied.
Of course it is.
Yeah. Montana is a very interesting state. And the governor's race is basically tied. And the House, guess, want to guess? Yes? Basically tied. Yeah, the last poll I saw, the Democrat was up by 1 or 2 points in all, but that's statistically a tie. The poll before that had the Republicans up there 1 or 2 points. So it's a tie. And, oh, by the way, for the state of Montana, remember now, it is the voters that pick the electoral votes. And for all 3 of Montana electoral votes, President Trump won by like 20% in 2016. The last poll I saw, he's up by 5. So So it's been a big shift nationwide, especially in places where President Trump won very easily. So the election, it might be election week. Who knows how long it's going to take to count all the votes, but it's going to be an interesting election. Aren't you excited?
It depends on who's there.
I'm the same way, and I want it over. I got my my wife and I got our absentee ballots on Saturday. And so I like going in and voting, but we decided because of everything, you know. It's kind of fun to go into the polling booth. It really is. When you get a chance, it's fun. It's kind of neat. Who knows if they'll still be doing that? Okay, maybe just nerds like me, but so what compromise would be about how to count slaves for representation and taxation? Yeah.
The 3/5 thing.
The 3/5 thing, yes.
Yeah.
The 3/5 compromise. And in the commerce compromise, Congress can regulate commerce, but they wouldn't touch what for 20 years? Yes.
Or like slave trade.
Yeah, the slave trade. And the big thing was the international slave trade, because they were still bringing in, they were still kidnapping people. It's complex. People from Africa and bringing them to the United States, or the Caribbean, or Brazil. And we got to the executive branch. Oh, who was the philosopher who Madison really liked? In fact, the first phase of the French Revolution will be his phase, even though he did. It had he had the three branches of government, and they must be separate. The idea there would be some kind of checks and balances. Yeah.
Was it like that Montesquieu?
Montesquieu. Montesquieu. I like Montesquieu too. Yeah, Montesquieu. And you could really see the U.S. government come out of it. Partially because of the French Revolution, they tried it too. Most countries do not have things like that. The governments really are kind of intertwined, the different branches, because they followed more of the British model. French Revolution got a little bit crazy. Have you heard of the guillotine? Okay, so with that, didn't we get right to this? Do you remember this Article 2 in executive?
Yes.
Yeah, the executive interprets laws, executes laws. And you'll see in the textbook, you see people say that the Supreme Court interprets laws, and that is just simply not true. That is a shorthand that people make all the time. I think, you know, they hear little things and just assume the court looks at laws. They don't look at laws unless there's a court case. They do not look at laws. So the president's the one who decides how they'll be interpreted, and executive order has the force of law. Executive orders are big deals, because the president can say how these laws will be interpreted. In fact, executive orders are so powerful, it sometimes can be difficult for future presidents to change their predecessors' executive orders. And this was actually a big deal when President Trump wanted to get rid of many of the laws restricting mercury pollutants in the air from power plants. He wanted to reduce restrictions to allow more mercury in the air. And previous presidents had, especially President Obama, had done executive orders to strengthen those requirements. So it took them actually 3 years to get rid of that requirement. So now there's more mercury being spewed into the air. And, you know, I'm so tired of kids having like brain function that that's me being a little facetious. I'm actually pretty scared of mercury. That's kind of mercury.
Yeah, it's not good.
But
Not really good for your brain.
the argument is that it would make coal power plants so expensive that they'd have to find some other way to create electricity. Solar or something. But these are complex. But that gives you an idea of the power of that. Next. That's actually a really big deal. Because I'm not going to lie, I'm concerned about mercury. I like fish. It gets related to fish. But we'll get to what regulations, the arguments for regulations and against regulation. So with that, also the president is the commander-in-chief in the military in times of war. Now I repeat, in times of war. Congress will later on say that the president should be commander-in-chief in the military in times of peace. With the idea being, shouldn't you have a consistency of command? it was such a big debate whether or not there'd be a standing army, a standing military, meaning a full-time military, not just militia. This was a huge debate. It would be a massive debate in this country for years. Eventually we'd have a standing military, now an incredibly powerful kind of a military state. But this is a big deal. The president is not your commander-in-chief. If President Trump comes in here and orders you to do something, you do not have to do it. He does not have that power to order you. Now the odds are President Trump walked in here and told you to do something, you do it because you'd be so shocked to see the president in our classroom. You know, okay, I'll do it. Mask. But we'll get to veto in a second. I'll put the veto here, but we'll come back to that. Foreign policy. Foreign policy is another thing that the president is a single voice. They negotiate treaties and negotiate with other countries. The Constitution says the president, the executive branch, will create a cabinet. And this cabinet will do the functions of the executive branch. And for very weird reasons, the part of the cabinet that speaks for foreign policy for the president is called the Secretary of State. Everybody else in the world will call their person who speaks for foreign policy the foreign minister in some way. Ours, for some reason, this goes back to kind of the weird part about creating government, it's the Secretary of State. So it's the State Department. By the way, anybody know who the Secretary of State is today? Mike Pompeo. So obviously a very important position. And so that's the executive branch. So remember I had the executive here, legislative here. So let's get to the legislative here. This is Article 1 because there's the most enumerated powers of anything right here. But they write the bills. Writes bills. I don't know why I put it that way. I was trying to, when you do like the phrase. They write the bills, but both the House and the Senate must pass the bills for it to go to the president. And this was specifically designed to make it difficult to pass laws. So put that down. It is meant to make it difficult. They did not want laws to pass that would be too radical. And they really thought the House would be crazy because that's the only body where the people have a voice. And most people can't vote anyway, so just a tiny group of people decide here. The Senate, chosen by state assemblies, the upper house will be a check on the power of the lower house to make sure the lower house doesn't get out of hand. That was the idea. And, yes, that is what is out. Laws go to the Senate to die. I guess a better way to say it, bills go to the Senate. There's a lot of bills. Civil rights bill, heck, we'll get to a number of these bills. Bills about slavery, most importantly, something called the Wilmot Proviso, which we'll get to. Heck, there would have been national health care insurance, but it died in the Senate in 1948. So that, enumerated powers. And you could argue that's a good thing or bad thing, but the Senate killed them. Enumerated powers. These are the listed laws. And each of these laws is called a clause because the Constitution is a legal document, and if you get these legal documents, they are clauses. And so with that, just 1 second, I forgot to do something. Why aren't you working? I hate this. Okay, back. Obviously, I'm not going to go through them all. I haven't listed here, but I wrote it, typed it up here so you can see. The first one is regulating commerce. They regulate interstate commerce or trade. This is an immense bit of power. Because what it means is the federal government can regulate any trade that goes over state borders. And when I mean regulate, I don't mean just the particular product themselves. They can also regulate the quality of the products. They can regulate the working conditions of those who make the product. They can regulate pollution. They can regulate the wages. This is immense power. And most trade in the United States is interstate commerce. I mean, there's virtually nothing you have, nothing, that does not involve interstate commerce. Yes?
You said they regulate everything that goes across state borders?
state borders. They also can do some regulating about national trade too, but the big thing we care about is interstate. Now, within the state, that's regulated by state government. But I can't think of anything you have right now that is purely made in the state of Montana. There's nothing. You might think, wait a second, I go to the farmer's market and I buy products. How much you want to bet those seeds they grew it with came from interstate commerce? And if they use organic fertilizer, I bet a good hunk of it came from overstate borders. Maybe not, but it's really hard to find something. So that gives Congress immense power. But don't forget this. If Congress can pass a law, Congress doesn't enforce the law. Who enforces the law? And that gives the president more power. All Congress does is pass the law. The president has to carry them out. Pre-police, the assumption would be a military. That's why there's such a fight about standing. Military. Taxation. Okay, the power to tax, this is huge power. Not only does this allow for the government to create currency, it allows for the government to pay back debts, it allows also for the government to regulate the economy. I mean, they can heavily tax businesses they don't want to function anymore. Or they can set the taxation system up to have money go from poorer people to richer people. Or have money go from richer people to poorer people. They can do that with taxes. In fact, that's what Alexander Hamilton, one of his big goals, would be to set up the tax system so money funnels from poor farmers to rich merchants. It's called the whiskey tax. We'll get to that. And it can go the other way too. I mean, you can tax something to destroy a business. Have you heard of prohibition in the 1920s? That's how they enforced it. The federal government put 1,000% tax on whiskey, on alcohol. 1,000%. You know what 1,000% tax means? It is a lot. So that means if you sell your alcohol for $1, the seller has to pay $10 in taxes. How long will they be in business? By the way, that's what a bootlegger is. Somebody who avoids the taxes. It's also called the black market. You might have heard that phrase too. But back to this. They also therefore can borrow. Governments cannot function unless they can issue bonds. And another form of borrowing is called printing money. Money will not be worth anything unless governments have the power to tax. And governments decide that. Remember inflation and deflation? I made such a big deal about it. Now, with this right here, government can control the money supply. It doesn't say how it would do it. It doesn't say how they'll tax, how it will borrow money to issue them, how it will issue the currency. It just says Congress can do these things. The Constitution was specifically designed to expand or grow. Another big one, the president, especially if the president gains too much power, might take the country into war. No. They want to make sure that there would be some check on that power. Only Congress can declare war. But let me be very clear about this. Congress does not declare war very often. They usually let the president do what the president wants. So they've basically abdicated their responsibility. Arguably, they've been unconstitutional. But, remember what I told you. No one really checks. When's the last time Congress has declared war? Yes, World War II. The United States has been at war your entire life. It's been at war most of my life. And they have not declared war any of those times. I know what you're thinking now before World War II. I had World War I, yes, but I don't count. Yes.
Wait, so the president is commander-in-chief in wartime, but if we're consistently in wartime, does that mean he's just always in control?
Remember what I told you. I know, you're exactly right. But Congress gave the president to be the commander-in-chief in peacetime to keep the leadership consistent.
Oh, so he's in peacetime now, not in wartime.
Yeah, even though technically Congress can say you're no longer commander-in-chief in peacetime. But
Oh, so they could just be like, well, he
That's kind of what happened.
Oh, interesting.
The Congress still has to appropriate money, and they'll go through like this charade of saying, we give congressional approval for the president to do whatever the president wants. The best example will be what's called the Tonkin-Gulf Resolution before Vietnam, but that has happened. I mean, heck, in 2001, after the September 11th attack, Congress just basically said the president can do whatever the president wants to fight terror. And it says that's really hard to define what terror is.
I feel like there's a lot of ways that could go terribly wrong.
Yes.
Yes. In fact, that's what we're doing, special topics, we're doing the Vietnam War, because we don't really get a chance to cover it really in detail in class. And yes, there's a lot that can go wrong. Next, there's more laws. I mean, we keep going on. They create the militia, they create the army, they do all this stuff. But one of the most important ones is called the necessary and proper law. In fact, Madison wrote, to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. So the necessary and proper clause. It's also called implied powers. Sometimes you see it called the elastic clause. And what it says is this: they can do whatever is necessary and proper to carry out all these other laws. Because remember what I told you? It never said how they would distribute the money after they print it. So Alexander Hamilton wanted to build a national bank that could loan money, distribute the money, in fact, even collect taxes. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say you can create a bank. He says it's implied under the necessary and proper clause. And so, let's get back to interstate commerce. Remember I mentioned the executive power about executive order about pollution and mercury? How can the Congress regulate pollution? In fact, that would have made no sense to anybody in 1787. This was pre-industrial revolution. Why? Interstate commerce. That's how government regulates pollution. Why is there a minimum wage? Interstate commerce. Why are there child labor laws? Interstate commerce. Doesn't it give them almost unlimited power? And so please put this down. This gives the national government almost unlimited power. Almost unlimited. And then it gives what branch even more power than ever before? The executive branch. Who wanted this? Madison. Madison wanted a strong central government. This was designed to be powerful. By the way, when Madison became a member of the House of Representatives in the very first Congress and realized perhaps the government, the executive branch might be going in a different way than he wanted, how soon do you think it was where he said, no, I didn't mean that for the necessary and proper clause. I meant for the government to be weak. About 5 minutes. And then how soon do you suppose it was that he wanted the government to be strong again when his ally, Thomas Jefferson, became president? About 2 minutes. Do you see where there could be some hypocrisy? I mean, in this element, to have a really strong national government that's not elected, this is classical conservatism. To have control over the government is liberal. Have you noticed people can be both conservative and liberal? When people say, I am a liberal, or I am a conservative, I bet they have elements of both philosophy. There's nobody that's perfectly consistent. And never trust anybody who says they are perfectly consistent. Never trust anybody except for me. I'm perfectly consistent. I'm being vague about things like that. So with that, yeah, this is a really big element. You see people have really a classical conservative arguments and classical liberal, and they might come, it's all over the place. I mean, I'm going to do my best to try to explain that to you, but there's no easy answers here. Somebody who claims to be a liberal can also be conservative in a lot of ways. And somebody who claims to be conservative can be liberal in a lot of ways. Does that help you? I hope we'll add more. We're building. So what does that make me? Vague. So with that, so let's get to the checks. Yeah. Hmm? Does that have to go right now? Emergency? Let me get this one part, then I'll do it. So let's get to the checks. The checks are between the federal government and the executive and the legislative branch. So basically what I'm talking about is this connection right here. This connection right here. Oh, by the way, the whole liberal and conservative thing, Madison is, wow. He is so both. It's amazing. So let's get to this. So the executive can check the legislative advance by signing laws or veto. So he either signs a bill, it becomes a law, or doesn't sign it, he vetoes it. And the big thing about that is the veto, all the president has to do is threaten a veto. And Congress would become very, very, very reluctant to pass that bill. So this becomes a very powerful political action. When Madison wrote the Constitution, at least this element, Madison was thinking the president would only veto unconstitutional laws. That didn't quite happen. And then Andrew Jackson would be the first president to use the veto for political means. I don't like that bill. We will veto that bill because the president has that power. So now it is political, purely political. Presidents rarely veto a bill, but they threaten to veto once all the time. President Trump in the latest talk about stimulus bill, this was actually a while ago now, the talks are dead. Nothing's passed in Congress today. But, yeah, nothing has ever passed. He threatened to veto help for the states. The states are being hurt because of low tax revenues because of the bad economy. And he said, I will veto any help to states. So I'm just giving you an example. And that's it kind of worked. Nothing like that's passed. I almost forgot something. Let's go back here really quick. Remember I told you the House and the Senate must agree? They both have their own separate laws for the House and the Senate, their own separate rules within that body. Well, the Senate has what's called unlimited debate. It's called a filibuster. The Senate has unlimited debate, meaning you can debate. A member of the Senate can talk for as long as they want about any bill, and they will not vote on it until that debate is done. And we'll talk more about filibusters a little bit later. Some of you heard about them. Well, after conservative Democrats and conservative Republicans tried to talk to death the Civil Rights Bill of 1964, Senate has decided to basically get rid of the filibuster in this way. If a bill comes out that somebody doesn't like, they say, I threaten the filibuster. And then it goes to a vote to end the filibuster. It's called cloture. To stop a filibuster, it needs 60 votes, a supermajority. See how hard it is then to get that vote for 60? If that vote doesn't pass, literally what they do, bill's dead. And so this is what you have to get. Because of the filibuster, it requires a supermajority in the Senate to pass anything. Supermajority, 60 votes. How many members of the Senate are there? 100. So it requires 3/5 of the Senate to pass anything. So what's passed in the Senate? What kind of bills are passed? Like naming post offices and things like that. Nothing is passed. Nothing. It wasn't like that when I was your age. It wasn't like that. But it's like that now. It started in the late 90s and now that just everything. So let's get back to this really quick then. They also have the bully pulpit. And pulpit is where a minister, that's where they stand behind to give a sermon. And this is bully, that's a Teddy Roosevelt phrase, means bully as in, rip-roaring speech. And what the bully pulpit means is the president can go out and propose laws, can talk to the people, because whatever the president says becomes news. If the president says something, it's reported. And one of the great abilities, instinct that President Trump has, is he understands that anything he puts out there is reported. And what does he do? He uses like Twitter, things like that. He puts that out there, it's news. And that's for him, a way for him to control the narrative, control, because he knows the media will report it. It's been very effective for him. Next, legislative. And the legislative is, they can override a veto, but look how hard it is to do. 2/3 to override it. That's why the threat of a veto works so well. Bills are rarely overridden. And they confirm appointees. The Senate will confirm judicial and cabinet level appointees. The Constitution says advise and consent, so they decided advise and consent means an up and down vote by the Senate. We'll talk about that more in a second. There's a, right now, President Trump has appointed somebody for the Supreme Court. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has just passed away, and they are probably going to push somebody through in the next few weeks. A little bit unprecedented in before an election. That's in fact has never happened before. This is a big deal. We'll talk more about that in a second. They also have the power to impeach. And originally they thought impeachment would happen all the time. But please write this down. What they believed would be an impeachment would be for corruption. The Constitution said high crimes and misdemeanors, but it appears as though, from their notes and what Madison was thinking, what they were thinking was that it would be using the office. The president or cabinet level members can be impeached, and judges can be impeached. Using their office for personal profit or to stay in office. Using their office to use the power of the presidency or whatever to remain in office. That they were concerned about corruption. They weren't thinking necessarily about crimes, even though, yes, if the president goes out and robs a bank, yeah, they should probably be impeached. But that's not what they were thinking. Of course, if the president does rob a bank, they can't be arrested. It's a really big gray area. Doesn't that seem weird?
Yeah. Is the president allowed to pardon themselves?
We don't know.
Didn't that happen once before? Someone stepped down and then their vice president stepped up and then their vice president pardoned? Yeah.
President Ford was Nixon's vice president. When Nixon resigned, he pardoned. So my guess is the president probably could pardon themselves, but we don't know.
That's so unethical. This feels like a scam.
Now, to get this really quickly, House impeaches. All you need is a majority vote to impeach. But impeachment is like an indictment. They lay down the charges, and then they're impeached. And then it goes to the Senate. And the Senate tries, but it's really hard to remove from office. The Senate has to find them guilty. So the Senate is the jury, but it requires 2/3 of a vote. 2/3 of a vote. So it's really hard to remove somebody from office, and soon it became a real political issue about whether or not to impeach. The founders thought, Madison thought there'd be impeachments all the time. As it turns out, there's only been a few presidents impeached. Teresa, if you have to go, you can go real quick right now. I'm sorry, I just want to keep this going. How many presidents have been impeached? President Johnson, right after the Civil War, but he was acquitted in the Senate by 1 vote. Next one, Nixon resigned. Most people think it's Nixon. He resigned. He would have been impeached. It was a done deal. President Clinton, but he was acquitted in the Senate, and President Trump. And President Trump was acquitted in the Senate. 3 presidents, all were indicted technically or impeached, but they weren't convicted. And there have been a couple cabinet members, a couple judges, but it almost never happens. So with that, judicial. Article 3, and almost nothing's in Article 3. It's a lifetime appointment, and basically it's federal cases and appeals. So there will be federal courts, Supreme Court, they deal with federal cases and appellate jurisdiction. So if judges see there is merit, they can retry the case at a higher level. And this is a lifetime appointment. So the judges will be impartial. At least that was the feeling, that they would be relatively impartial. It was unclear if they would be a judge in, let's say if they're appointed to the Supreme Court. If they would be a member of the Supreme Court the whole time. It doesn't say that. In fact, it doesn't say anything that they do. It's just here. That's all it's just the Supreme Court, the judiciary system. It is really vague because they didn't know and they couldn't agree. And there are some problems with lifetime appointments. I mean, what if they are a clearly lazy inept judge? Is that enough to impeach them? It's really hard to do. And you might get judges that will be on there for 40 years. The checks are what counts here. For the executive branch appoints judges. So they appoint. And that gives the president huge power. And few presidents have used this power so effectively than President Trump. Nobody's appointed more judges than him in history in this amount of time. And I can't imagine a situation where his appointment for the Supreme Court won't happen. And so that'll give him a third of the Supreme Court and as many as 40% of all judges. And he is very consciously appointing young men and women, mostly men. So they'll be on long, most are younger than me. I know I'm old, but still, they're younger than me. They'll be on long after I'm gone. What power does that give him? He'll be long gone. And yet have influence over laws for years to come. If you're talking about the current political party, Democrats have been pretty inept about understanding about how important the judicial is. The Republicans have really understood it, personified by the current president. Wow, this has been, just for exercising power, very impressive. The legislative branch, they create the court system. Why are there 9 members of the Supreme Court? This Congress said so. If Congress tomorrow said, pass a law, President signed it, there could be 1,000 members of the Supreme Court. They make those decisions. They decide what judges will sit on what body, and they could actually be rotated. It's a lifetime, but it doesn't mean they have to be a Supreme or justice for their life. Congress make that law. Congress can decide what they rule on. This is actually a huge power that, wow, this could be a big deal. They confirm judges too, which is happening right now. What is the check the judicial has? They didn't have a check, so they gave themselves one. In 1803, they gave themselves the power of judicial review. Judicial review checks the constitutionality of laws and actions. This is not in the Constitution, but this is the most important duty of the court system. And therefore, what's the most important court? The Supreme Court. This power is not in the Constitution. In 1803, they gave themselves this power in a court case, Marbury versus Madison. We'll get to it. This is kind of a big deal. Over the next, well, heck, the whole rest of the century, it's going to be debated. But by the 1880s and 1890s, it had been basically decided that, yeah, they have this power. And so this gives them the power to look at laws, to overturn previous laws. Huge amount of power. I mean, most environmental regulations are going to go up to the court in the next 2 or 3 years, and they can all be overturned or all confirmed. I mean, they have that power. That's a big deal. Or for that matter, a court case called Roe versus Wade about women's right for reproductive health, that could be up. It's a big deal. And here's the thing, though, they need a court case. They don't just look at laws. There are laws that are clearly unconstitutional. The Supreme Court only looks at laws, and that means that whoever brings a case up has got to have what's called standing. So that's it. That is our government in a very quick little nutshell. And they created a federal system, federalism. By enumerated powers, it listed out powers for the federal government. Federalism means there are separate branches, and on top's the federal government. But all power, the remaining powers go to the states. Federal, and then this mob of states and territories. I just thought this map was pretty neat. Because most laws that affect you directly are state laws. Federal, state. But what's the clause in the Constitution that gives the federal government unlimited power so it might bleed into state power? What's that clause? The necessary and proper clause is going to be a conflict. In fact, this conflict, therefore, of who has power, the federal government or the states, has never been decided fully. And on that note, what is tomorrow? And you're not coming in, right? Okay, there'll be a little bit of an assignment. I gotta give you a little bit of an assignment over the break. So, this is the last day for if you want to do some of your short IDs, I will give you some points for redoing or doing some additional short IDs. But today's the last day. Same with the credit. Have a good day. I won't see you for a full week. Is weather supposed to get better over the... Oh well. Such is life. Oh yeah, you had to take it.
I'm just doing it tomorrow virtually, or I just don't do it as well because I know it would crash and I have a lot of technological
I understand completely. Yeah, and and we talked about this.
I space it too, and I mentioned shred IDs. I was like, I can do that.
What person do you do?
I don't think I have anything going on. I'm not taking the PSAT or Wednesday either, so I don't have anything going on. Like I committed to Tuesday. The only thing I don't think I could do is
Well, how about send me a message in a second. Tomorrow. See, maybe you can do the later. Just make sure we do that so we can do it at the same time. Does that sound okay?
yeah.
Okay, sounds good.
I wonder if you do the short ideas. So what do I do?
Send me a note on Teams.
Send you a bunch.
No, message on Teams.
Oh yeah.
So then I can just respond and tell you what you put them. Okay?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I
Sound
draw
good? You have that skill set. You're a very talented young man. Go!
It's like Mr. Parker could be good as a dictator.
What's that?
You'd be a good dictator.
Think, I'd be a benevolent, I'd be a philosopher king. Who thinks I'd be a good philosopher king? I think everybody. I totally forgot about that PSAT thing.
Oh yeah, Wednesday? So stupid. I know.
How are you guys doing it? Seriously, how's it?
Once you go in,
You come to the school, you like go upstairs, you check in or whatever. It's like 4.5 hours long.
you go in at 7:50 something.
Are you doing it?
Oh, so you're doing it here?
Yeah, at the school.
And it's everybody at once.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Wait a minute, how you? I'm actually kind of confused by this. So where are you guys doing it at?
So the B-Day kids are doing it in the cafeteria, the A-Day kids are getting like put into different rooms.
Yeah.
Oh,
So all of us are just gonna be in somebody's room. It's like rooms 115 between
Can I be in this
125
one?
or something.
No, it's upstairs.
that's so awful. What's that? No, I'm not. In fact, I'm not here. I telecommute
I know,
on
and we
Wednesday.
have to be here at 7:45.
Hey, it's not that.
Yes, it is. It's 7:45. I can't stay up that late, but I can't wake up that late.
In my day, we'd have to get up every morning before we went to bed.
Yeah. I stayed up for 38 hours on Friday.
Oh my. That's not good.
That's not help. That's like. Wait, when did you go to borderline?
Let me shut off the camera, turn on another camera. The cameras never end. How do you get 5 messages so fast? Tyler sent me a file.
I was so mad at you two when you said there you go, buddy. I thought you meant that you knew these guys now, so you just wanted to see how long
But do you know how many buddies I have?